locations at affordable prices. These locations are about an hour away from the airport, only 35 minutes from the motorway, 10 minutes drive from Central University College, 10 minutes drive to the beach, and close to Prum Senior High School and Ghanaman Soccer Center of Excellence. For more details, visit our website www.myafricaproperty.com or call our UK office on 0208 123 2523. For our US and Canada offices, call us on +1 585 184 994145. You can also email us at ghana@myafricaproperty.com.
The show where we discuss everything you ever want to know about business.
Yes! How do you get the energy to do
I'll be
this?
told I have a lot of energy. Finance. How do I grow my business? Where am I going to find my customers? Join me every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. on Star Radio UK to get all the information and tips that you need to become a successful entrepreneur and become financially free. Remember, don't let life dictate to you. Rather, put your signature on life.
Get ready for this.
On mobile and soon on DAB. This is Star Radio UK, the leading Afro-Caribbean
Hi everyone, it's your
radio
girl Bebe
station
Clement,
in
the author
London.
of How to Go From Employee to Entrepreneur and the host of your weekly business show, BB Means Business, the show where we discuss everything you ever wanted to know about business but you were afraid to ask. How do I start my business? How do I raise the finance? How do I grow my business? Where am I going to find my customers? Join me every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. on Star Radio UK to get all the information and tips that you need to become a successful entrepreneur and become financially free. Remember, don't let life dictate to you. Rather, put your signature on life.
Get ready for this.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the BB Means Business Show. As you know, this is a show where you come, where you get all your advice, your tips, your information, your knowledge about anything and everything to do with business and entrepreneurship, with the hope of helping you and your business grow so that you can become financially free. For those of you who are joining for the first time, I'm your girl, your host, Bebe Clement, and alongside my husband, I run a group of small companies in London, UK. Okay, so just a couple of things to say before we get on with the show today. First of all, I've been away for a couple of weeks, so we've had a couple of repeat shows. Thank you for all of you who tuned in to those repeat shows. Thank you so much. And also to say thank you to everybody who came along to the Black Business Entrepreneurs Conference that was held a couple of weeks ago in London. Now, that was a really, really good event. And a lot of you came to hear me speak. And I spoke on the mindset of the new entrepreneur. The mindset of the new entrepreneur. I will be playing you a clip from that during the break. Bear with us, we'll get there. Who came along to that, and it was such a great event, and I know they'll be putting it on again next year. Now, today, if you sell products, whatever that product may be, it might be shea butter, it might be makeup, it might be bags, it might be shoes, whatever it is that you sell, here's a question for you. Particularly if you're a Black business owner, here is a question for you. Are you stuck in embeddedness? Are you stuck in embeddedness? And some of you be asking, well, I'm what embeddedness means. Embeddedness is where you are dependent upon your own people group for patronage of your product. So you know how it is when you start a business, the first people you go to, of course, are your friends and your family, and that's okay. They buy the first time, maybe the second time they do the sympathy purchase because you're hassling them. By the third time, you become a nuisance and they start avoiding your calls. So he says, okay, I'll having exactly what you are selling. So now you're out of options. And the business that you thought was going to make you a millionaire, was going to make you financially free, becomes reduced to a side hustle or at worst, a hobby. Now, the reason why that happens, as far as I'm concerned, is one, we are thinking too small. We have got to get outside of our own people group. You've got to get out of embeddedness. So you've got to think bigger. You've got to dream bigger. It's important that you upscale. I mean, wouldn't you like to see your products in high street stores? But in order for that to happen, do you even know where to start to make that happen? It doesn't just happen. Where do you start to begin to make that happen? So I thought today, what I do was I bring along somebody who can answer those kind of questions. Because it's important that, again, as a new entrepreneur, you start thinking big. You've got to start thinking big. And part of that mindset is even considering yourself worthy of competing with the big boys. There is no reason why you should be anywhere in the world, whether you're in Ghana, Nigeria, London, UK. There is no reason why your product should not be on the shelves as like everybody else's products. No reason. So the first thing you've got to do is get over that mental hurdle. Oh, I'm a small business, I'm just running this company from my bedroom. It's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. There is no reason why you can't stand on the same stage as the big boys. So today I have the utmost honor of having a returning guest on the show. He was here a few weeks ago and we were speaking at that time about the importance of a networking group as a business growth tool. And he has a networking group like I do. My networking group is called Black Businesses UK, has over 8,000 members. And he has a networking group as well called Black Business and Black Entrepreneurs International. And we were speaking about how to use the networking group as a growth tool. But today he's going to be speaking in a completely different remit. And today he's going to be speaking about how to get your products in Asda, Tesco and Sainsbury's shelves. Now, for those of you who are listening from outside the UK, maybe Africa, Asda, Tesco and Sainsbury's are high street stores in the UK. They're the big boys in the UK. And so how do you get your products on their shelves? Because once you got your products on their shelves, you're pretty much made. So it gives me great joy to welcome back to the show Mr. Mark Dalgety. Mark is the MD of the largest black-owned tea company in Europe, Dalgety Teas. And they can be found on the shelves in top supermarket chains in the UK. And he's going to share with us how he did it. So Mark, welcome back. I'm not sure where he is at the moment because he's always all over the world. I'm not sure where you are at the moment. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Bebe. Thank you for having me back. I'm actually in London now. I know last time this.
You're in London. Okay, something wrong with the volume. Not sure what's going on there, but something wrong with the volume. So let me try and.
Better now? Any better?
Okay, slightly better. Yeah. So you're in London. You're with us at the moment, are you?
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right, cool. So welcome back to the show, and thank you so much. Listen, I can't tell you the number of people who have contacted me and say, oh, this is one I've got to listen to, this is one I've got to listen to. So they're all ears from all over the world. They want to listen to you. Can I say, first of all, before you even start, as a black entrepreneur, oops, you disappeared. Okay, you're back again. Okay, you move your camera around. As a black entrepreneur, when I go into shops like Asda and Tesco, and I see Dalgety teas on the shelves, I cannot tell you the pride that I feel. I really do. And so I really want to thank you for the journey so far, for what you've done. You may not know that, but it's not just about selling tea. It does more for our community than that. And I'm saying it from my own personal experience, the pride that I feel when I see your name on the shelves, like, yay, one of us, we're out there. So it's really cool when I see that. Okay, so first of all, tell us a little bit about your journey. Tell us your story. How did you get started? Why tea, of all things? Why tea?
Well, tea mainly because about 25 years ago, herbal teas now emerging in the market. But at that time, most of the herbal teas in Europe was basically flavored tea, which was basically a lot of black teas, the raspberry flavor, blackcurrant, and obviously European using the flavors and the products that they know. Growing up in the Caribbean and Ghana specifically, we have what we call bush tea, which pretty much in Africa and all, I mean, we all call it bush tea because simply it was just the leaves or the leaves or the roots or whatever from something that is growing in your yard or something like that, that we all knew was good, that we literally just took and put in the pot and boil it. And we just call it bush tea. I mean, the irony of the matter, I always felt that when I was growing up, I grew up in the city. And when I went into the country area, all my cousins were obviously drinking all the different bush teas. And they always seem to have extremely white teeth and very smooth skin. And we, I was drinking all the Milo and coffee and the fancy packaged tinned stuff from overseas was the ones with the bumps on the face. You know, obviously not until I got old, I realized that the reason why they were always looking, they might not have had the most fanciest of clothing, but they definitely always looked terribly healthy, you know. In terms of the skin texture, the teeth and the hair was always thick and black and everything to go with it, you know. So I mean, I sort of like identified that. I mean, literally that the herbal teas that I grew up with in the Caribbean, and obviously some of it, most of it is also known in Africa, was not very well represented. So I just thought I'll introduce the Europeans literally to some Caribbean or African Caribbean herbal teas that were richer, stronger, and of more importance, 100% natural. So I mean, when we say we have peppermint or we say we have ginger, it's 100% ginger, naturally dried, no artificial flavorings, sprays or enhancers, that which is what a lot of big companies tend to do in order to either maximize their profitability or simply just, I mean, a lot of big companies just like doing these fancy stuff, you know. It's all about profits at the end of the day. It's not always necessarily about taste, you know. So I mean, that was basically what my vision was, you know. It's basically introduce some Caribbean herbal teas into the I would say the metropolitan world, the European part of the world.
Okay, perfect, right. Quite a few things that you said that I want to draw out. First of all, because like I said, we've got a lot of people listening from all over the world, particularly Africa. So one, the first thing to think is your product may not be refined. That doesn't mean there is not a need for it. So it doesn't have to be, you know, so well packaged, or, you know, you can deal with all that later on. But the most important thing is don't count yourself out of the game just because you don't have all the fancy packaging or all that. There is a market for your product, and especially in this climate when, you know, we're going back to all things natural. Those of you who are listening from Africa, please be encouraged that there is you know, room for your product. It doesn't necessarily have to be fancy or refined or, you know, look like $100. There is room for it. So that's the first thing. The second thing was there was a gap in the market that you recognized. I also wanted to point out that there's this impression that if it's homegrown, if it belongs to us, it's not as good. It's not true. It's not true. In fact, you know, the West are now looking to us to bring the natural products, you know, the natural products. So please, those of you who are listening in Africa, the Caribbean, that is something to note. Do not count yourself out of the game just because you think your products are not fancy enough or not what they're looking for. That's not that's not true. Okay, so Mark, you've been in the game for about 25 years, you said?
Yes, that's right. Approaching 25 years.
Wow. Okay, all right, so there are people in different parts of their entrepreneurial journey listening to this who you know, want to get started. So talk us through. So let's say I was a market woman in Ghana. I want to start putting or getting my shea butter on the shelves of Tesco, that kind of thing. Where do I, okay, actually, let's leave Ghana for now. Let's look at the UK members, UK people. Where do I start? Who do I call? Where do I look? Where do I go?
Well, I mean, to tell the truth, the first thing that you have to understand to get onto the multiples is that you've got to, first of all, have a product that is either in demand or has a proven concept or proven brand that is already selling. It's really that it would automatically take on something that is just suddenly arrived. I mean, even if you do very well in Nigeria, Ghana, that's still a good advantage, because what you'll do is use the provenance to show that, by the way, guys, you've got a large Nigeria Ghanaian consumer footfall coming through your stores. And we are the #1 shea butter manufacturers in Ghana or in Nigeria, right? And we feel that, I mean, with these 100,000 footfall that you have that with Nigerian origin people, they would always prefer to buy my particular product, you know. So it doesn't mean to say that, I mean, but if you just arrive just like that, I always say to people, like in our case, I mean, we spent at least 3 years, I mean, as I said 20 odd years ago, spending a lot of time really building the brand in the independent market, which is a normal independent ethnic grocery shop where I knew a lot of African and Caribbean people or people from the migrant population in the UK were shopping. So by the time I actually approached the buyer, I mean, I actually had a track record, and they also knew the product. Yeah, I mean, at least I was able to convince some of the managers and say, because you got to remember that the big supermarkets, they are also looking at what the small shops are selling, because they are looking for good products to sell. So they actually have people that go out and walk into all those little newsagents and halal grocery shops all over, trying to pinpoint what, and picking up a lot of marketing intel. What is the trend? Who's buying what? Why they're buying this? Why is this brand being sold? I mean, and they take that now and then. By the time you approach them, they kind of like would know, oh, this one is one of them that we know it looks as though it's all over. You know, so we pretty much use that. First of all, it also helps you to understand, because you don't want to enter the supermarket and then suddenly realize that, I mean, the color of your box is wrong, or you shouldn't have packaged it this way or something like that. But when you practice on the independent, you could make all the corrections so that by the time you actually approach the multiple supermarkets, everything is kind of like in place. You have a barcode. The barcode is the correct format. It's in the right position. Sometimes I mean, you have things like the packaging. If you have a box, you know, the barcode, the best before date, the ingredients should be on the same panel. And these are things that you kind of like learn when you're practicing on the independents. But the independents wouldn't be too bothered with that. So, I mean, years ago, a lot of independents didn't even have barcode machines, you know. So, I mean, my first packaging never had a barcode machine, you know, until afterwards I realized, okay, as I started, you know, moving up in life, I should say, I became into supermarkets, that small supermarkets, but they had a barcode machine. So by the time I actually approached the big supermarkets, all my packaging had barcode machines. But it's just little things like that, you know, that you should.
Now that is interesting. That is interesting. It really is. So guys, I hope you're listening to this. So you don't just get up and try and sell your product to the big boys. There are certain things that you need to do to get your house in order, so to speak. So I kind of like the idea of practicing on smaller retailers, the more ethnic retailers. Now yeah, I can see the logic in that. So guys, the first thought, and there, like Marcus said, there is your learning curve. That's your school, so to speak, and to get your products in order. So, like you said, the barcode. Now, I probably wouldn't have thought about that. I don't even think about that in terms of the product that I sell, which is books and stuff like that. So, yes, I have to have an ISBN number and I have to have a barcode. But I wouldn't have necessarily thought about that in relation to a product. So, these are the kind of things that you need to be taking on board, guys. Your packaging, the coloring, barcodes, those kinds of things, and getting feedback. Use it as your market research. Get feedback from your retail outlets as regards to the kind of comments that customers are making about the products. Whether they're buying it or not, those that are buying it, why are they buying it? Those that are walking by and buying somebody else's product when it's the same as yours, why are they walking past your product? and then adjust accordingly, so that by the time you approach the big boys, you pretty much ironed out the kinks. Another thing that he said, which I was not aware of, but obviously makes sense, is that they have people the big boys have people going into the smaller retail shops looking at what is selling. So again, it's a good idea. Don't be too advanced. It's a good idea to get your product out there, and they will see it anyway. And if it's selling, if it's moving, they're on it anyway. So by the time that you even approach them, they at least have a general idea about your products. You're not starting from scratch. They have an awareness about your product. That's valuable information. Thank you, Mark. That's valuable information. Okay, so let's say I've gone to the small outlets. I've ironed out the kinks. I think actually now I'm ready to approach the big boys. Where do I start?
Right. Okay. There's another level now. Once you've not perfected what you think you have a product it's selling in the small shops, to go into the big supermarket, the next major issue is being able to supply, having the volume, being able to upscale your business. I mean, it's one thing you making 100 or let's say 1,000. Let's say you're making pepper sauce, 1,000 bottles at home or in a little kitchen somewhere. You go to the big boys, their first order 50,000, and it's not 50,000 for the month; it's 50,000 for the week. So you got to be able to upscale. You understand me, from 1,000 to 50,000. And what is interesting that is being able to upscale and maintain the same quality of product that you're making when you are making 1,000 bottles or one bottle. And sometimes a lot of people fall down in being able to do that, because suddenly this becomes a very big problem. Suddenly the guy who used to sell you peppers all the time, his farm only could supply you with 100 pounds every week, and you suddenly need 1,000 pounds. So then you have to start sourcing from other suppliers, and then other suppliers might have differentiations in the quality of the pepper or whatever it is that you're doing. Yeah, something you have to buy from different countries. Different countries might be having the same product, but because of the weather, the soil, and various things, the flavor could be slightly different. So all these things have to start taking into consideration. And you now look at the first thing is to upscale, to being able to increase your production capability. Yeah, because you have to remember with the multiples, once they list you, they expect that whenever they make an order, you actually get marks on that, and they expect you to have your marks need to be between, I think, 98 to 100%. If it starts dropping to 90, you get delisted. So that means to say every time they order, right, if you are unable to supply, they see it as a loss of earnings for them, because remember what these guys do, they calculate the cost of every single square inch, right, on the shelves in the supermarket. So if the product is out of stock, they see it as a loss in earnings, right? And then if you're unlucky, they might put that loss in earnings and start billing you for you not supplying. Next thing you know, instead of you waiting on a check, you have to sign them over a check.
Whoa!
Right. So a lot of companies sometimes get themselves into trouble on that basis. So that's something I thought before we jump into, I go and see the buyer. It's important for you to understand that you have to think of, like when you start sometimes, we personally, when we started, although say Tesco's has got about, I think about 2,000 stores, we just went in to say about 25 to start with. And then from there, they purposely did that to us. And then we got into like 50, then we moved to 100 and 200, but if we'd actually gone straight into 200, we probably would have gotten into trouble. So I was actually quite pleased. At first I thought I want to get into 200 right away, but I'm actually quite pleased that I wouldn't get 25 to start off with. And then that's only one supermarket, because if you then, normally once you get into one, you can then use the carrot and run to the other supermarket and say, well, look, Tesco's has got my stuff. Why is Sainsbury doesn't have it? They would suddenly decide, we got to be in the... Obviously, if Tesco's is taking on this product, we got to have it too. So suddenly you could then move easily from that, even you were in 25, right, or 50. If all three big supermarkets stay open in 50, that's 150 stores. And remember that these guys have got something like 100,000 people walking through the stores every week. So you take 10% of that, right, of that 100,000. If 10% buys your product every week, that's right away 10,000 units. You multiply that by 30,000 units. It might be less than that. I could.
Mind-boggling, yeah.
So you have to understand your scalability. you know, in terms of being able to supply. Now, I mean, moving.
Sorry, go on. Go on.
I was going to go to the next part because you asked me about how you get in there. So I was going to.
Well, actually, before we go into that, we're going to take a break in a minute. But I wanted to just comment on some of the things that you said. It actually reminds me. It reminds me about a little while ago. I did a series called Faith and Finance, and one of the things that I was discussing was the story of when Peter lent Jesus his boat, and Jesus used his boat as a pulpit, and then Jesus told him where to go and get the fish. And then the Bible says that Peter brought in such a hole that his nets broke, and he had to go to one of his colleagues who had another boat and ask him to help him bring in the hole. And the point I was trying to make with that story was that sometimes your systems fail you at the point of success. At the point of success, which is the point I think that you're making, is that you've got to make sure that if the success that you are hoping for suddenly appears, that you can live up to that. You can deliver. You can do what needs to be done. Also, what I found interesting was what you were saying about some of the products. If you had to source them from other places, some might have a slightly different flavor. Even cost implications and things like that would be there. These are things, guys, that you need to start thinking about. If I suddenly get an order, if the success that I'm looking for is suddenly bestowed upon me in relation to my products, can I actually deliver what I'm supposed to deliver? So this would be a good time, guys and girls, to start putting those systems in place. Whatever you need. So imagine, just imagine that, okay, as from tomorrow or next week, I'm suddenly successful in what I'm trying to do. What systems do I need to have in place by way of personnel, by way of cash flow, by way of products themselves, to ensure that I can live up or I can provide the products that I'm wanting to provide? So you need to start thinking about that and start looking at where you're going to get the money, where you're going to get the personnel, where you're going to get the equipment. You start thinking about that now. It's also, I think, a good opportunity to start thinking collaboration, and this is not something we do well in the Black community. We don't think collaboration. We always think we have to do it all by ourselves. But listen, guys, collaboration takes nothing from you. On the contrary, it actually opens up a bigger market for you. It enables you to do what you can't do for yourself. So don't be greedy, because usually it's greed that's at the bottom of the base of that kind of thinking. Don't be greedy. Think of who do I need to bring into my circle to enable me to do well when success comes a-calling. So start thinking about that now. I'm going to leave you with that thought. We're going to take a quick break. And then I'm going to leave you with that thought. For those of you who are not aware, this is a live show. So you can ask Mark. Listen, don't waste this opportunity. You might not have an opportunity to speak to somebody like Mark again. You're in the room with Mark. So if you have any questions or comments or anything that you would like to share with him or ask him, this is the time to do it. So if you're joining us from Facebook, just put your questions in Facebook Live. And if you are joining us from Twitter, our Twitter handle is @StarRadioUK. You can tweet us and we will respond. Or if you want to text or WhatsApp us on 07539 661 that's 07539 661 or indeed email us at info@StarRadioUK. Any questions or comments, please put them in the chat or get in touch. And Mark is here. He's available to answer those questions. So we're going to take a quick break now. Don't go away. We'll see you in a moment.
Senior is someone who turns passion into profit. Passion into profit. Listen, I'm going to end with this. Away with all this chasing the money. Away with all this, I got to get rich or die trying kind of mentality. Because at the end of the day, you can buy 30 houses, but you can only sleep in one bed. All right? What you need to do is look at your life. What has God placed inside of you that you can use to serve your fellow man? Serve them with as much as what God has given you as possible. What is your heartbeat? What are you good at? What do you find easy to do that I might find difficult? And it could be anything. It could be singing, dancing, encouraging people. It could be anything. But don't go into a business because of the money. Go into a business because you want to serve somebody else. the money will follow. The money will follow. Okay? So that's
Business, the show where we discuss everything you ever wanted to know about business but you were afraid to ask. How do I start my business? How do I raise the finance? How do I grow my business? Where am I going to find my customers? Join me every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. on Star Radio UK to get all the information and tips that you need to become a successful entrepreneur and become financially free. Remember, don't let life dictate to you. Rather, put your signature on life.
Get ready for this.
Okay guys, welcome back to the BB Means Business Show. I'm your host, Bebe Clement, and today I have joining me Mark Dalgety. Mark Dalgety is the MD of Dalgety Teas. He is the largest black-owned tea company in Europe, and we have the honor and the pleasure of having him on the show today, and he's talking to us about how to get your products in Asda, Tesco and Sainsbury's shelves. And for those of you who are joining us from Africa or other parts of the world, Tesco, Asda and Sainsbury's are our top supermarkets in the UK. So he's just before the break he was talking us through the procedure, and he was talking about getting your house in order, making sure you are able to deliver. Now, Mark, you said something just before we took a break that I found interesting. You were saying that if you are not able to deliver, you kind of get blacklisted, and you might find yourself having to write them a check rather than write you a check. Talk a little bit more about that, because that's important to know.
Well, because what happens, as I said, they have allocated a space for you to supply, and basically what happens is that they expect 100% delivery on any order they make 100% of the time. Every time you're unable to deliver, right, or you're short, you lose a point, right? And there's a range of where they would consider that they have as a target that any supplier should be able to do. And once you get below that, and I know that the range is anything between I know definitely go into below 90, you delisted. That's it, full stop. Yeah, people get delisted simply because if you have a bad shipment, it didn't arrive on time. But you have to be able. That's where the finance part, which I was going to get to, is important. Because one of the things that people have to realize when they get into the multiple supermarkets, a lot of times they work on sometimes anything from 90 to 100 days payment terms. So if you're accustomed to running around the small shops and getting paid on delivery, suddenly you can find that you have this massive customer that's buying 5-10 times what the smaller guys are buying, but he's not paying you like how the smaller guys are buying from you. Yeah. You have to basically understand how to model your financial strategy in selling to them. Yeah, there's normally ways of doing that, which is obviously you could factor factor the invoice, which you might lose a few % off of it by having a company or the bank factor the invoice. Or in our case, what we did basically is use a distributor who we negotiated different terms with to supply into the multiples for us. And then also what that distributor did is also held the stock. Because a lot of time, our factory, for instance, the distributor probably been holding about, 5 container worth of our goods to make sure that at any point in time, once the multiple say order, they had the supply. I couldn't afford to hold 5 containers as holding stock in my factory.
Yeah.
But the distributor didn't have a problem with holding that. So there again, there's another issue with regards to finance, because suddenly if you have these big orders, depending on where you're operating from, where you're going to hold the stock. If the guys say they want to buy 20, 30 pallets or whatever, or 2 containers worth every month. If they buy 2 containers every month, you actually have to have 6 containers in stock, because there's a potential that it could go up. Yeah. So you have to always make sure you're holding at least 2 to 3 months in stock based on the potential orders that these guys are going to make. Yeah. So from the financial, take that into consideration. So we're talking a lot of these things that you have to know before you go speeding down to say, I want to supply sales.
Yeah. Wow, these are things that you don't even think about, honestly. Especially what you just said now, storage. Where am I going to? Oh, wow. Yeah, go on. Sorry, go on.
Business. You're going to supply instead of your business growing, you actually run bankrupt because you aren't able to actually deliver, and you get yourself into all kinds of trouble trying to get stock, don't know where to find it, sign a contract that you can't supply on, you don't have enough warehouse space, you name it. It could get very complex.
Wow. Guys, I hope you're listening. These are all the things that you need to be taking into account, particularly cash flow. Cash flow, as you know, you've heard me say this many times, but cash flow is the lifeblood of any small business. But in this particular instance, I think it's even more vital that you are aware that you have sufficient cash flow to cover these kind of expectations. This is really interesting, really, really interesting. Okay, so when you've approached the buyer, first of all, where do you approach the buyer? How do you find the buyer? Let's start with that.
Okay, finding the buyer, first of all, you have to identify who is the buyer you should be identifying. I mean, I'll tell you our story basically. It's obviously, it's probably might be a bit dated now, right? Because I know they've changed the systems up a lot. But I mean, in Dalgety's case, I mean, 20 years ago, I had approached I found out, first of all, I went to the tea buyer to buy tea. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, I was selling tea, but the tea buyer said no. And what I identified is that it was another buyer called the ethnic buyer, because at that time the supermarkets were now moving into what you call the World Foods division. So I was able to then get the World Foods buyer or the ethnic food buyer to buy the teas, although the tea buyer didn't want to buy the teas. Okay, so you would have thought that the tea buyer would have bought the teas, but the tea buyer said he has enough teas and he didn't think that our teas were established enough for him to put it in the mainstream aisle in the supermarket. But then I didn't give up from there, because then I began to realize with the multiples they have: tea buyer, there's hot beverage buyer, coffee buyer, Milo buyer, you name it. I mean, all kinds of buyers specific to various, cold drinks buyer, ambient buyer, yeah, and each one of them have certain product lines, because you remember that these guys could easily have about, 50, 60,000 product lines in this supermarket. So it's not one guy or for even a whole section, and then they still have divisions there, I mean, they may be the ultimate buyer, for a particular area, like the southeast or the north,
Okay. Okay.
You have to start by identifying why you want to target.
Okay. Now that again is important, because I would probably just have thought, okay, let's say you're a shea butter cosmetics buyer or something like that, and if they said no, that would be the end for me. So it's interesting that you said that. It's very important. So guys, again, I hope you're listening, that it's not just one buyer. If one buyer says no, that doesn't mean that's the only person that is in a position to buy from you.
Yeah,
okay, all right, that's cool.
Shea butter, although it's something that is a cosmetic, you remember that shea butter, okay, now it's slowly getting into the mainstream part of the market, but there's more Africans and Caribbean people that use shea butter. So you might suddenly find selling shea butter and you get it into the World Food section where all the ethnic foods are being sold, because that's where people who use that particular product, right, actually shop. You see? So that's a good example, because as you said, shea butter would normally you would expect to go straight into cosmetics. Like tea should have been in that section. Yep. And I mean, luckily for us, I mean, sometimes when you go into that section, it's quite good also, because then you're not automatically competing against the very, very big competitors. Yeah. Because if I went straight into the tea section, I might not have even survived, because I would be coming direct into competition with Twinings and PG Tips, who's spending millions of dollars on BBC One and BBC Two advertising their products.
Yeah. All right. I want to do a quick shout out to Mercedes, the bishop's wife, who is joining us on Facebook, and she says this is brilliant and helpful. Thank you so much. So Marcus, those are comments from some of our viewers. Thank you. It's brilliant and it's helpful. And that's what we exist here for. Baby Means Business. That's what I'm here for, to ensure that you get the very best. We have the dopest guests on this show, so I'm really pleased that you're here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, let's say the buyer has said, oh yes, Bibi, we like your shea butter. I'm using shea butter as an example. So all you shea butter sellers in Africa, hi. So let's say, okay, we like your shea butter. What then happens? Do I do I have to go and pitch in person, or how does it work?
Well, these modern days now, what tends to happen is that it's more difficult to actually get listed, because a lot of times most of the supermarkets tend to ask you to fill a form out on a portal, right? Where you could explain everything about your products, your USP, your this, your that, and then from there, they would then decide, well, they would list your products and either call you in for a meeting, right? Or, I mean, now obviously there's Zoom, which makes life a bit easier. And have a meeting for you to explain about your products. And they'll ask you a lot of the questions that we spoke about earlier. Your capability of supplying. They might ask you for if you have any standards, ISO 9000s, any one of these standards related to the industry that you're in. All of that is what tends to help you, with regards to getting listed. So that is with you supplying directly. There's various other options in terms of supplying the multi-supermarkets. I mean, in our case, although I managed to get it directly into the supermarket 20 years ago by myself, I actually opted to go and use a distributor who is already having a relationship with them. But that distributor already is supplying about, 30, 40 product lines. So I got that distributor to put our lines along with their lines, so that when they went in, they represented us. And then, as I said, what I distributed, they were a total buffer for me, because I couldn't hold, 2-3 containers in my factory. So they bought it from me. I also negotiated totally different terms with them than what at the biggest supermarket. So I mean, in the early days, I actually got them. Well, the first 2 months I got them to pay me on delivery, right? And then after the next 2 months was 1 week later, 2 weeks later, and then it got all the way to 30 days later. That helped me to get the money to go and pay the farmers to up their game in supplying all the raw materials I needed. Because obviously I didn't to the farmers and saying to them, I want you to up your game, but I had to finance the farmers, because they wouldn't just go off and suddenly move from, because just like I'm trying to move from, say, 1,000 cases to 10,000 cases, you're trying to tell the farmer to move from 1 acre to 2 acres, from 1 acre to 10 acres. So he actually needs to finance to be able to finance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it shows the point that cash flow is so key in these matters. It is so key. I like that what you just said about using a distributor, because again, that would not have occurred to me. So you could piggyback on somebody else, basically. You could piggyback on somebody, and that actually might take away some of your headache, because they're like you said, they already have a relationship and things like that. Wow, interesting. Very interesting. Okay.
Sales that you have to get systems in place with your computers at work, the links into their computers. I mean, now the multiples have gone to another level, even from when I first started. Before, you had to order, and basically would deliver straight into store or into one depot, right? Where the Sainsbury or Tesco trucks will come and pick up the goods. Now it's gotten to another level where they've got something called a holding house, which has more financial implications. What happens to this holding house? You are a supplier, then what you call a holding house, and then there's a supermarket. The holding house has to always hold a certain level of stock in it. So it might be a container or whatever it is all the time. The supermarket then sends in its trucks to these depots, these middle depots, right, to collect goods based on the sales that are going through the store. But the invoices is only raised based on when the goods leave the middle depot, not when you supply the goods into the middle depot.
Okay.
Okay. In the middle depot, you get charged for the goods that are sitting there for storage.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Understand your costing. Absolutely understand your costing. Because if you don't understand your costing properly, you could suddenly realize that you're not collecting any check, or the check you collect from them is less than the money that you spent to get the check. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
These are all the things you don't think about. That was actually one of the things I wanted to talk about on here, was the whole issue of pricing, because obviously I don't supply goods. I only supply services, advice, information, that kind of thing. I provide services. And one of the issues that we have, professional service people have, is knowing how to cost. How do I charge this client? Do I charge this client for the information I've given him, or do I charge him by the hour, or that kind of thing? So I want to talk a little bit about pricing. So let's say I'm standing in front of the buyer in Sainsbury's. He likes the product and everything like that. How do I establish a price? Do I have in my mind, okay, I'm going to sell per unit, let's say I'm going to sell 50p per unit for a jar of shea butter. And they come back to me and say, you're having a laugh. We're paying 25p. That's it. What then happens? Do I cave and say, okay, I'll take the 25p? Or do I stand my ground? Or do I try and negotiate? What happens?
There's always opportunities to negotiating, right? But normally,
because you know how, the reason why I'm saying this is because you know how it is. Sometimes you're just so intimidated. You're just so overwhelmed by the fact that they even want to listen to you that you just say this first thing that they say, and you agree to it.
It's the work on. You know, the multiples tend to work on margins that are normally something you call about 40, anything from 40 to even 50% on what they call POR.
And what's POR? Percentage
on return.
Okay.
So, on return basically is that if your product is selling to the consumer for, say, £1 or $1, right? They want 40% on the price that the consumer is buying it for. It's 40% on £1, which is 40 pence, right? Whereby a lot of times if you sell to a small shop, right? If you're selling something, say for £1, right? Or let's say 65 pence or 70 pence, right? And you put 40% on 70 pence, you probably find that £1, 1 pence or something like that. I have my calculator in front of me, okay? But suddenly you were selling them for 70 pence, but now you suddenly find you have to sell it for 60 pence because their price is based on the price that they sell. The percent is based on the price they're selling for. Yep.
Yeah.
But a lot of people get confused with that because I mean, actually, a good example is might be to say, let's do it on a pound, right? We do some maths here. Yeah? So if, for instance, you went and you said, a smaller shop, and you said, okay, I'm selling you this package here for £1, right? Mm-hmm. I said he wants to pay 40% on that. Then 40% on £1 is £1.40, right? But 40% on £1.40 is not £1. Mm-hmm. on £1 is probably 85 pence.
Yeah.
85 pence, okay? So you just lost 15 pence on every unit, okay?
Wow.
So that's just your base price. Then you have to go backward. Because if now you're using a distributor, this want to earn % again, which is %. So sometimes whatever price you think the consumer needs to, you want the consumer to be paying for your product. Because a lot of times it starts from the price that the consumer has to pay and work backwards. I mean, you do it both ways, right? But ultimately, you would want to look and say, okay, I've got a competitor in the store selling a packet of, tea for £1, right? Unless, then you would want to make sure that you are either selling, if you can, 5 pence less than him, right? Okay? In order to compete with him. Or at least at the same price that he's selling for, unless you've got a product that is so good and you've justified to the buyer that this stuff is got such a great USP and demand is so high, I could sell my tea for £2. Okay? Right? And then they might accept that also. I mean, that happened to us. I mean, in the early days when we bought our teas into the market, right? We were selling our teas, the shop was selling our teas in those days for like £1.29, £1.19. When we went into the big supermarkets, I was busy thinking, oh, I mean, they need to sell for that price. They went and they sold our teas for £1.49. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to get, there's no way I'm going to last it here with that price. But then it sold. But what they had understood is that the quality of Dalgety products was superior to most of the other teas that were on the shelves, right? So they took the risk of putting the worst price that they could probably sell it for, because they knew that if it sold, they'd make a lot more margin, okay? And I mean, and then they could always do a sale and put it down to the price that it's supposed to have been in the first case.
Okay.
Always work that way.
Okay.
But you normally actually have to understand what price you want to consider, and then work backwards, and then see if you could actually afford to supply at that price. And I literally would say to people, just start that. If you think your product, the consumer is paying £1 for your price, make sure you could sell it for literally 50 pence. Yeah.
Okay.
50% off of it, and there's where you start at. You know, if you could shave 100% off of it, right, and sell it for that price and make yourself 30-40%, then that means to say your product has to be costing you something like about 30 pence for you to make 20 pence on it, because you have to sell it to the multiples at 50 pence.
So you really have to have your figures. Yes. You know, you really have to do your maths. Can I ask, when you're going through this whole process, is it worth hiring? I don't know if you actually do this, but I'm just saying, is it worth hiring someone like you to actually walk you through the process, especially things like if you were going to go and pitch? Because, like I said, someone like me, I might probably cave when I shouldn't cave. And then some of the industry terms that you have used today, I might not be familiar with. Is it worth having someone who understands the game with you?
Yeah, you can. There's people who offer that service too. Apart from a distributor, there's people that you call, I can't remember what you call them, like agents. And they, sometimes what they do, they just manage products in the multiple supermarkets. So they would basically already have some sort of communication going on with the buyer. Yeah. And they would then go to the buyer. They would actually sometimes work for like 5% or something like that of the sales value. But then all they do is speak to the buyer for you. You still have to go and do your own warehousing and all that sort of stuff. But they understand the language, this and the this and the that, and you know, it's a total different language goes on there. You know, so that's always another option actually in terms of, if you're not confident, is finding one of those agents that would present your products to the multiples. You know, they sit down and understand what's a good USP for your products and go and present it to the multiples. But then you obviously pay them a much smaller percentage. It's not a bad option also, to tell the truth. You know, there's various options. It really depends on I don't know what you want to do sometimes, I think, you know, or what you're comfortable with. Because
I think that's worth doing. If it's possible, I think that's worth doing. So you don't agree to something you can't do, and which brings me on to the whole issue of the legalese side of it, the legal side of stuff. Of course, that's an area of interest to me, and the whole issue of signing contracts out of panic or out of pressure, or just out of relief that someone's even offering you a contract. I cannot overemphasize this. Do not sign anything that you have not had a solicitor have a look at for you. It sounds like common sense, but you'd be amazed at the number of our people that do. Well, what's your experience with the legal side of stuff?
Well, on delivery, contracts is important. And it's absolutely true what you said. I remember, on one of my journeys about 10 years ago, sometimes I need various people in my life, and depending on the challenge I have, I use consultants to help me. Okay, and I remember I met this guy from I think it was one of these big consultants, Addison Young. I used to meet him every Sunday and just sit down and just talk things I'm trying to do, and then he would just say why, what, where, when. And one of the things I came away from him, I can't remember his name, but sometimes you meet people and then there's something they said that you always remember what they said. He said, Mark, you could talk as much as you want, just don't go signing anything just like that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I understand why people do. It's sad, but I understand why people do, because they just say, wow, they're offering me, if I don't take it now, maybe they'll withdraw it, blah, 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 that kind of thing. Can I ask you something, Mark? Obviously, because of the climate, the economic climate in which we're in, supposing something happens that perhaps affects your ability to supply, let's say you were sourcing your product from maybe Ukraine and there's a war on and things like that, and the cost of supply goes up. Who bears that cost? Is it you, or is it the supermarkets, or is it shared?
You bear all the forces. The supermarket is only interested in sell products. You can't sell the product, you get delisted. They're not interested in any war. Their business is to supply to the consumer. Your business is supply to them. It's for you to find out if why that a war was coming and make adjustments, or find another.
Okay.
You go and close
right.
To get your supply. They're not interested in none of that. They reckon that they supply to the consumer, because at the end of the day, if a consumer goes into the supermarket right now and can't find bread, right, they're not going to blame Ukraine, right? They just don't have any bread. They don't know what they're doing. You see what I'm saying, right? Although they know there's a war going on and they can't get wheat, they're not interested. Tesco's gets all the blame. So that's why Tesco's is not going to take the blame. He's going to look for somebody who else could supply him with the bread. If you can't supply it, right? That's how it goes, unfortunately.
Okay. All right, so we're coming towards the end of the show now. I just wanted to ask a couple more questions. What mistakes have you made along the way that you could give us a bit of warning about so we can avoid?
I think one of my biggest ones years ago was employing the wrong people. I had a very bad employment practice. Just employing anybody. Once somebody told me what they said they could do, I always just believed them. Actually, and then they came, and it came to a total crashing down the hill many years ago. It was in the credit crunch time. I didn't realize that I was that bad actually. But I was trying to avoid the credit crunch and set up a factory in Jamaica. So I worked out that, when, in 2009, when they had a big credit crunch, businesses were falling through the roof like nobody's business. I worked out that what I need to do is reduce my cost of manufacturing. So I actually approached Jamaican government. I didn't really know Jamaican very well, but what we call the Jamaica Trade Invest was very, very good. Perfect country to invest in. They guided me through setting up a whole 5,000 square foot factory. Literally single-handedly. I was walking around Jamaica with a paper in my hands and like a donkey with blinkers and everything they told me. And I set up the factory to perfection and employed the first 10 Jamaicans that rapped on the door. And very good. And broke up all the machinery. Okay? So I ended up with 2 factories where the one in Jamaica was making bad stuff that was selling to the expensive factory in England. So I was really on the brink of collapse, basically. And eventually I just closed the factory down in Jamaica. So, obviously I was there back in London, like, as I said, a wet dog walking around, all grumpy for a few months. And I'm pretty much almost annoyed with every Jamaican that I met because I factory. Until one day I got up and I thought to myself, by the way, who employed the folks? It's you who employ the folks. Stop blaming people. You blame yourself. Because if I employ the right people, which I know Jamaica has very, very good working people, right? I would have had a perfect factory running. But I'm the one who went and employed the wrong people. So luckily the University of Grange had a day course on how to employ people, and I went there and sat down, and then it explained to me about if you want to employ somebody, first of all, you identify the job that you want the person to do, and literally list down everything that you want in that person. So if, for instance, I give you a good example. If you have a small little takeaway restaurant, and you want to have somebody just in the front to take the orders, right? You literally write down that, okay, I want a girl or a boy that is, 25, 30 years old, that is agile, that combs their hair with white teeth, with a good smile, that is punctual and says good morning to everyone that comes in there, right? Because if you don't actually do that, right, you'll end up with what you see in some takeaways in London, right? That the guy, you employ somebody that lives next door to the takeaway because you think they'll be punctual, and the guy that lives 25 miles from there reached to work for the guy that lives next door.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have somebody that comes in that is more annoyed that a patron has come to buy some rice and peas than good morning, right? So, that one there, once I did that, I was able to then, revamp my whole company, start employing the right people, understand what I needed to look for, and I think that there was a serious, a learning point for me, because as I said, BB what used to happen to me, like I would be the electrician, and I'll see you, BB, and said, oh, by the way, do you know an electrician? And you said, oh, you know what? My husband's uncle, grandfather's son, or whatever it is. and the reason you said the guy's electrician because one day your lights went out and the guy came and changed your bulb, right? But Because the light bulb, the guy is the greatest thing since sliced bread. You recommend, because I think BB is such a great person. I employ the guy, electrician. Poor guy doesn't know anything, but all he knows is change the light bulb. And I'm an electrician.
Yeah, that happens a lot actually. Yeah. I think one of the greatest points to draw out from that is, one, when you fail, take responsibility for your failure. It's not final and it's not fatal. In fact, eventual success is just a series of failures. You get up, you dust yourself off, you check and find out what failed in the process. And guys, like I always say, the fact that you fail at something in business does not mean you are a failure. So don't take failure personally, and don't let that end your dream. So once you fail at something, get up, examine the situation, what failed, what role did I play in the failure, make sure it doesn't happen again, put things in place to make sure it doesn't happen again, and get up and go on and be the success that God planned for you to be. Mark, I cannot tell you how happy I am that you came on the show today.
There's one thing I'd like to say also, a motto that we have. We use a term that we say, crisis is a dangerous opportunity, right? Because, I mean, from crisis, once you come out of it, right, it actually, in many cases, takes you to another level. So even from that crisis that occurred, once I understood what I need to do, I suddenly in 3 years grew my business almost 3 times than it was that it took me 10 years before to do.
Wow.
So we have this term that we said, crisis is a dangerous opportunity. Don't take it and make it take you down. You learn from it. You take hold of it. You see what I'm saying? You know, and that's what I like to leave it and tell people.
Thank you so much, Mark. Guys, you heard that. That's a new one for me, and I'm going to be using that. Crisis is a dangerous opportunity. That's a good one. That is a good one. I like that. Mark Dalgety, thank you so much. You have been brilliant. Thank you for sharing those tips. I've had some more comments. I want to give a shout out to Wally, who is joining us on Twitter, and all the other people who are joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know time is your most valuable, the most valuable thing in your life, and for you to invest that time in the Bebe Means Business Show, I appreciate it. And I'm glad that it has been worth your while. Thank you, Mark, for coming along, and we wish you every success. I understand you're in Ghana now as well. How's it going in Ghana?
It's progressing nicely. I mean, we're doing a two-way traffic there. Obviously, it's not just about selling products to the market. It's also about finding raw materials. So one of my joy in being there is obviously now engaging with a lot of villages. We're creating a lot of employment by having little villages, almost taking them over, giving people employment there, but getting raw materials that we're bringing back into this western part of the world, you know. So apart from just selling tea, the excitement is really just realizing that a lot of the raw materials we originally would have bought from the Caribbean, we just find them left, right, and center in Ghana. And as you know, we get into Nigeria very soon.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, we wish you every success. Nigeria is waiting for you. Ghana thanks you. UK thanks you. The black community thanks you. We appreciate you and we wish you every success. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining the Bebe Means Business Show. I'll be here again next week. It's Bebe Clement. And as I always say, don't let life dictate to you. Rather, put your signature on life. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, it's your girl Bebe Clement, the author of How to Go from Employee to Entrepreneur, and the host of your weekly business show, Bebe Means Business, the show where we discuss everything you ever wanted to know about business but you were afraid to ask. How do I start